First up on the show, we'll be starting with Mark York with the city and Amanda Gumbert from UK, who are going to tell you everything you need to know about Lexington's watersheds.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm joined today by Dr. Amanda Gumbert with the University of Kentucky's College of Agricultural, Food, and Environment. And we want to talk just a few moments about watersheds and why they're important, why we should be aware of them. And I guess the first thing I want to tell our viewers who are watching is what a watershed is not. It is not a small building in your backyard that collects water. That is not a watershed. So first of all, Watershed 101, what is a watershed?
Okay, well, that's a good question to start with. A watershed is any area of land that all of the rainwater that falls on that land drains to a common location. So that can be a common stream, a pond, a lake. So every place on Earth has a watershed address, and we can think of them in big watersheds, like the Mississippi River is a huge watershed, or we can think of them in smaller watersheds like what we have here in Lexington, like the Cane Run watershed is a smaller watershed, or Town Branch watershed is a smaller one. So different sizes, but the commonality is that all of the rainfall, precipitation, whatever it is that falls on that land drains to that common point.
And we're actually standing in front of West Hickman Creek. We're in the southern part of Fayette County of Lexington, so we're in the West Hickman watershed. So again, any rainfall, snowfall that happens in this portion of Fayette County will eventually drain to West Hickman Creek. And so in Fayette County, we have 7 different watersheds. And one of the things we look at in terms of managing water quality is doing it by watershed. And maybe talk for just a moment about the different watersheds that we have and the different activities that take place.
Sure. Each of our watersheds are different, and we commonly will look at the land uses that are in a watershed. Most watersheds you can classify as mixed use, meaning there might be residential area, there might be a light industrial, so those are kind of urban land uses. But then we also have rural land uses, farming, other open areas, green space, parks, those kind of land uses as well. And so each of those different watersheds, has a variety of things going on in it, and each of those activities can influence the water body itself.
And when we talk about influencing the water body, let's say it's a creek, for example, that's a water body that may be influenced by the activities going on within that watershed. And that leads us to a term that we in the field may refer to as we have impaired streams. And so we've done monitoring, we've done testing of the water in the creeks, and not every creek in Fayette County has been tested, but there's been enough sampling that's gone on that we know that we have what we call some impaired streams in Fayette County. So what does that mean?
So basically what it means is, if you think of our streams as having a report card. So we're back to school now, and our students are starting to learn, but after a few months of school, they're going to bring home a report card to show how they're doing. And the same thing happens with a stream or a water body. And so in Kentucky, we monitor those streams and rivers, and we have this report card that says, yes, that stream is making the grade. And what it means by making the grade is that stream is of high enough quality that it meets the designated use that it's given. So it could be a use for primary recreation, that we could swim in it. It might be for aquatic habitat, so the little critters and bugs that feed the fish can live there. It also might be for drinking water. So some of our streams actually contribute to drinking water sources. And so that's what it means to have that grading system or report card. And if they don't meet the grade, and maybe those streams are polluted by things like sediment or maybe pathogens, sometimes it's nutrients, those are kind of the top 3 for us. When they don't meet those grades, then we call them impaired. And so we start to look around and figure out what we can do to improve the quality of the water in those watersheds.
And let's talk about maybe a couple of watersheds in Fayette County, because unfortunately all the watersheds in Fayette County, all but one, have impaired streams in them. And so let's talk about a couple of watersheds that we know have impaired streams, and I'm deliberately choosing these two, so you all will forgive me at home. Let's talk about Town Branch. Maybe some of our viewers have heard about Town Branch, which flows underneath downtown Lexington. So if you look at the activities that are taking place in Town Branch, how would you characterize what's going on in Town Branch, and then what might be some of the activities that are taking place, and what are some of the impairments that are taking place?
So when I think of Town Branch, I think of a highly urbanized area. And so I think of all the neighborhoods that surround the central part of Lexington and in the heart of Lexington downtown. I think of all the buildings that are there. I also think about the University of Kentucky and so we have lots of impervious surface, which means we have lots of concrete and asphalt. And so anything that gets dropped on those surfaces, it might be cars leaking a little bit of oil, it might be in our landscapes that we apply a little too much fertilizer and that gets on our sidewalks. And so when it rains, all of that material gets washed into Town Branch.
And one of the things that those of us who do outreach for environmental issues such as water quality, we tell people if it's on the ground, it's in the water, because cigarette butts, litter, motor oil, all that goes down our storm drains in Lexington, and those storm drains lead to pipes which then empty directly into our creeks. There's no treatment process, so if it's on the ground, it's going to end up in our waterways. So we've kind of talked about Town Branch, kind of been the center part of Lexington. Let's talk about the Cane Run watershed. Where does it start, and how far does it go?
Okay, well that's my favorite, of course. But the Cane Run starts in downtown Lexington as well, also in a pipe. You can't see it. And so around the Castlewood Park area, so if you live in that area, that's your watershed. But you can't see a creek, so it's also piped. It surfaces, or daylights as we call it, near the intersection of New Circle Road and Old Paris Road. And so then we start to see it, and so it has the same kind of vulnerability that the Town Branch has in those highly urbanized headwater areas. That's what we call the upper, the origination of the stream. And then the stream then flows in a northwesterly direction toward Georgetown. And so as it flows that way, it travels past Lexmark International. It goes out toward Coldstream Park, meanders through Coldstream. If you ride the Legacy Trail or you walk the Legacy Trail, you cross the Cane Run Creek about 7 or 8 times. And then it makes its way through the University of Kentucky's research farm. And then beyond that goes to the horse park. It keeps on going beyond the horse park and eventually supplies water into the Royal Spring aquifer, and some of that surfaces in Georgetown. So Georgetown residents have a vested interest in the Cane Run because it is partially their water supply.
And we can, because of activities within Lexington and Fayette County, we impact the water quality because watersheds do not recognize political boundaries.
Not at all.
Geographic boundaries. I mean, it crosses the county line,
right.
Doesn't stop, doesn't have to pay a toll or anything. It goes into Scott County directly. And if you look at Lexington and Fayette County, Town Branch kind of sits down in a small bowl, if you will, but the rest of Fayette County is actually like the top of a bowl, and the rest of our watersheds actually drain away from Lexington. So it's drained directly into the Kentucky River or into other creeks, which then flow into other counties. So the water quality that we have in Lexington does directly impact the water quality in other counties.
It certainly does, and the Cane Run is a good example of that. And so thinking about the land uses in the Cane Run, we've got urban, we move out to light industrial, then we move into the rural agricultural land uses before that water then makes its way to the Royal Spring. So all of those different land uses really can affect that water. And so we are very influential in Lexington because we do affect lots of other people and their water sources. So
you think about, again, our drinking water supply for Lexington and Fayette County comes from the Kentucky River. So we may be directly impacting water quality ourselves in the Kentucky River, but also keep in mind that upstream of Lexington, there are other watersheds and other communities that in turn are affecting the water quality in the Kentucky River. And of course, Kentucky American treats that water before it ends up coming out of our taps at home. But again, we have a direct impact on water quality. So we've talked about what a watershed is. We've talked about the different watersheds in Lexington, and kind of in some broad general terms, the impacts that are causing the streams to be impaired somewhat. So let's talk about our daily activities. What do we do at home or at work that may directly impact the water quality within our watersheds, and what can we do about it?
Well, there's a variety of things that we can think about. If you think about just the activities that you might do at home, if you have a lawn and a garden, a lot of times we want those to look really nice and pristine, and so we might throw some extra fertilizer out there. And I really recommend that you be really careful with that. Of course, at the university, we always recommend a soil test. So test your soil to figure out what nutrients are there before you throw extra out on the lawn.
And if you contact the Extension office in Lexington, you can talk to them about performing a soil test. You take the samples, you take it over to the Extension service, and they can actually tell you, you may not even need to put fertilizer out on your lawn. So that
exactly.
Having the soil test done is the really first step to take.
Yeah, it really is.
So what else do we need to be thinking about in terms of our lawn and maybe our garden?
So if you do decide to apply some sort of fertilizer, some basic things you can do is make sure when you apply it that you sweep it off of any sidewalks or driveways that it might fall on. I personally like to use a mulching mower so that we leave the grass clippings on the lawn and let those be a source of fertilizer. There's a lot of nitrogen in those grass clippings, and so leaving those on the lawn is a natural source of nutrients. So saves you a little bit of money, saves you time if you don't have to bag the clippings, and so I just feel like that's a good way to go. Certainly making sure that you're sweeping off those excess fertilizers. Also thinking about if you have places, maybe a downspout that you could put a rain barrel on and you could hook to that. You can use that rainwater that you capture to water your garden or your lawn, but also you're going to reduce the quantity of rainwater going into our storm sewer system, which sometimes can help us reduce flooding locally. Also think about the concept of a rain garden, and this is not a new concept, but maybe new to us here in Lexington. In areas where your downspouts come out into the yard, if you have an area that you can actually excavate out a little bit, and if your soil's drained properly, then you can install a rain garden. We have materials through the Extension service that will direct you on how to install a rain garden, but it's just a different feature in the landscape with different plants. You can put some really beautiful flowering plants there, and also you're reducing the quantity of the quantity of water going into the system, but you also have the opportunity to filter out some of the fertilizers it might have picked up on the way. So.
And let me dispel one common myth about rain gardens is that they hold water and people get concerned about mosquitoes. That is not true.
Right.
A properly constructed rain garden allows that water to drain through the garden itself, and again gets absorbed inside the ground. So it's not holding water, which again, some people are concerned about.
Right.
So we've talked about rain gardens, rain barrels, fertilizing your lawn clippings, leaves. How about my car? Can my car impact water quality?
It certainly can. In the neighborhood in which I live, we have on-street parking. And so if you park on the street or even in your driveway and you have a little bit of an oil leak, then you can impact your water that way, water quality, because anything that drips from a car that while it's sitting, gets on the surface of the road or the street, can run off into our stormwater. Also, if you change your oil at home and you do maintenance on your car at home, making sure you properly dispose of those waste products. Recycling waste oil, disposing properly of batteries or other materials from that. Another thing is to think about if you wash your car at home. And sometimes we park it on the driveway and we wash that car and it's very shiny and looks great, and all that soapy, cruddy water just flows down the street and into the storm drain. It's best if you have a grassy area on your lawn that you could pull your car over, wash your car, and let that water soak in through the soil. Let the soil do its work to take some of those pollutants out of that water before it goes back into the water system.
And any other thoughts about what we can do at home to help protect our streams in Fayette County?
One other thing I thought about is with sediment control and any runoff. If we have bare spots on our lawns or places where water might concentrate and run off, sometimes that creates bare soil. And when we have bare soil and it rains, we're going to have pollution because we're going to have that muddy runoff. So making sure that we put mulch on those areas or try to seed those areas in with grass or some other live plant material. Another thing is to pick up after your pet. And I know some folks don't like to do that, but it is certainly important. If you're walking your dog, pick up after them, and certainly it's you're a good neighbor because your neighbor won't really like that little present that your dog left for them, but it's also good for water quality.
We've kind of covered the gamut, if you will, in watersheds and what they are and why they're important to us. Again, at what we want to stress to people is every day we have the opportunity to impact watersheds and our creeks in Fayette County, either in a positive way by following the directions on the bag of the fertilizer or picking up after a pet, or we can impact the watershed and water quality in a negative way. Again, not fixing that oil leak in our car or tossing litter out the car as we go on the way to work or school, wherever. So we do have an impact on water quality in Lexington. And again, we try to manage the water quality in Fayette County on this watershed basis. So it's very important for those watching this program to understand that we all live in a watershed.
That's right.
And we all impact the quality of the water that flows through the creeks within each of those watersheds. Dr. Gumbert, thank you for joining us today.
Sure, thanks,
If you'd
Mark.
like more information on water quality and what you can do to help us protect the environment, always go to livegreenlexington.com.